Hi, welcome back to the channel. What we're going to do today is talk about suspension. I've got a couple of things. First thing is, as you know, I've just bought this Interceptor. Got it registered, and I took Sue out for a ride, see what she thought of it the other day. We did about 250 kilometres. Now, as you know, I live in Bulgaria. The roads are very bad here. I was expecting the worst of the worst with this, to be honest, but I was, you could say, pleasantly surprised. First off, the rear suspension, I set off on the softest setting because the springs are quite stiff on this, and it seemed okay, but after a while, as the suspension heated up, it started to become a little bit bouncy, but it wasn't uncomfortable, it was just bouncy because there's no damping on these, no control to adjust the damping. So we clicked it onto the next setting up, and it was great. And that was even after we did 250 kilometres. So it was as hot as it was going to get, the suspension, because the suspension will speed up as it gets hotter because the oil's got thinner. This way you get more bouncing. I was quite happy. And we've even got long sections of road here that's made of cobblestones. And that's Soviet times. So there's bricks out the cobblestones missing, there's big holes and all sorts, and it still was quite good. I was quite chuffed about it, really. The front, well, it was okay, but when it was on the rough going, it was bottoming out. I was watching the forks go up and down, and there was, following the contour of the road, but where the big potholes was, which we haven't got the odd pothole, we've got massive potholes where the tarmac's been destroyed by the winter or the heat in the summer. It's like today, 40 odd degrees again, it melts the tarmac, the lorries just rip holes out of the tarmac. And you also get big waves where the lorries have been in the tarmac like that. And it's like a bit like a roller coaster. And when you come off the top of one into the other, the bike, it did bottom out a few times there. So I've got to do something with that. I'm not disappointed. I'm not disappointed because I'll show you why. Right, my 500 Bullet outside, it's got 135mm of front suspension travel here, which is about 5.5 inches, I believe, which 5.5 inches of travel on a road bike is quite exceptional, really. And that handles these roads in Bulgaria brilliantly. But there again, it was designed to run around the Himalayas where they don't even have tarmac, do they? Mind you, a lot of our roads, there isn't any left. Right, the other thing is my Himi. You've all seen this before. Now, I bought the Himalayan because of where I live. Now, the Himalayan has 200mm of travel, which is about 7 3/4. So you would expect this bike to be perfect on these roads, which it is. I know I've had to change the rear shock absorber, but that isn't because the travel was wrong, it's because the shock absorber packed up. The Bullet, over 5 inches of travel, exceptional. Now the problem being, the Interceptor here, this has 110mm, which is only 4.25 inches. Now basically it's just a road bike suspension, that is. Well, we've got dips and potholes a lot deeper than 4.25 inches. So you drop into one of those, it's just going to top out, bang, 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 it's going. So I've got to do something about this. But what I did was, it's so easy. Well, let me tell you about a guy that's contacted me. He's a regular subscriber of mine. He's got Interceptor, and he fitted YSS front suspension kit, the full kit, PDQ valves, springs, preload adjusters. And he contacted me because he says the suspension is worse than it was stock. And he goes, oh, right. And I says, well, did you not work out what you needed and everything else? He says, oh, I don't know. What do you mean? What do you mean? I says, well, what made you buy YSS suspension? He says, oh, I watch. He's a well-known YouTuber. I'm not going to say his name. I watched this guy and he did a suspension change. He's got an Interceptor, he's got YSS rear shocks, he's got this, got that, got the other. Now I know the guy, most of the stuff he gets is given to him because he's a very, very popular person. He fits it, does a video, it's all you guys are there watching it. You know, I can just imagine like when he was doing his front suspension, I've seen his video. You sat on your settee at home with your credit card in your hand, aren't you? Think, God, I need that, my suspension's rubbish. Well, I says, well, why didn't you contact him? I said, if you've watched his video and he's told you how to do it, contact him. You know, I'll help anybody. But I do get a little bit miffed sometimes where somebody's watched somebody else and there's a problem, they then come to me to help solve their problem. No, I'll help anybody, but it does sometimes. He says, I've sent him a few messages. And I says, what's he say? He says, nothing, he's won't even reply to me. No. I says, do you know why he won't reply? He goes, no. I says, because he's got no idea what to tell you, believe me. I says, I know the guy, he's not a proper mechanic, he's very, very good at talking. He's good at talking, we'll leave it at that, right? So he says, well, could you help me? So I says, well, how heavy are you? And blah, 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 blah. And tells me his weight. He's lighter than me. I'm about 85 kilograms. He's just over 80. I says, well, the springs in the YSS kit are too strong for your weight. He says, well, do you think they could get other springs? I says, yeah, you can through YSS. But, I says, you've bought a kit with the springs in them. You've got them springs in your bike. They ain't going to want them back. And even if you buy the brand new ones, if you want to buy the kit and you know you want heavier springs, if you was 110 kilogram, I need heavier springs. Can you get me heavier springs? Yes, no problem. They cost you, I think, I'm not sure if it's about 80, 90 quid extra on top. So you end up with two springs, one set you're going to use, one set is no good to you at all. Like. Or if you're lighter, you want lighter springs. So I says, you're a bit stuck really. And he goes, well, what can I do? I says, well, I'll tell you what to do. I says, believe it or not, the original suspension, I says, did you check the sag on your bike? He didn't even know what that was. I says, look on one of my old videos. I've done a video on how to set the sag on suspension. You've got to do that before you do anything. I says, you know, you've just gone out and bought a kit because somebody says, oh, this is what you need and this is the best and blah, 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 blah. I said, it's just no good doing that. I says, take the springs out and put the stock springs back in. He says, well, that's going to put me back to where I was, isn't it? I says, no, not really. I says, you could take the PDQ valves out as well. And he says, well, aren't they doing anything? I goes, no, not at all. I says, in the instructions of the kits you get, it just says put the PDQ valve in the forks. I says, it doesn't tell you have to set it. You buy from YSS PDQ valves, that's the valves. The first thing when you put in the kit in, it drops in from the top and sits in the bottom. You slide them in, then there's a washer, then your springs on top. You buy the PDQ valves separately, and it says you've got to take the damping rods out. For a start, damping rods is down here, and it's got a bolt in the bottom of here that holds all the forks together. You have to take that out to get the damping rods out. Now, once you've got the damping rods out, you've got to drill the two holes in the side of them, which is the flow of oil, which off the top of my head, I think they're 3mm stock. it tells you to drill both of those out at 8mm, which is quite a huge size difference. Now the reason it tells you to do that is at 8mm it takes all the resistance of the oil flow out of the damping rod. If you just put the damping rods back in with an 8mm hole in your oil, your forks will be up and down like a spring. They'd be because there's no resistance in them anymore. But that's what the PDQ valves are for. And you're supposed to set the PDQ valves, it's usually about 2.5, 3 turns. Don't quote me on that. That's what I think it is like. Then you put them in, and then it's the PDQ valves that control the flow of oil. But if you don't drill the damping rods out, you chuck them valves in on top, the oil's still going to be controlled by them small holes in the damping rods. Might sound a bit confusing, but that's what I mean. So I says, they're not doing anything. And he asked me, why don't they tell you this in the instructions? I said, I don't know. I says, I've dealt with YSS before, the very good company. Back in the day when they wasn't that old and well known, you could contact them and talk to somebody on the phone. I have tried it a few times myself since when I fitted their kits and stuff to other bikes, and you're just told to contact your dealer. Well, your dealers are people that sell handlebars, bar ends, chains, sprockets, tyres, YSS suspension kits. They've got no more idea than you have. They can't help you. It's just the way things are. Anyway, what I decided to do was have a look at the video this guy had done. And it turns out he did 2 videos. He did the first video showing you taking the bike to pieces, taking the fork leg out. One fork leg he took out, he took the wheel out, the mudguard off, one fork leg, took that to pieces, drained the oil out. He just dropped the PDQ valves straight in, no adjustment. He didn't take the damper rods out because basically he didn't know what he was doing. He's just following the instructions on the paperwork that comes with it. Put the springs in, put the oil in. He made a big fuss about using a fancy measuring stick to do it, and the oil. He was on about the viscosities of the oil and whatnot. He's a very good talker. Put that fork leg back together, slid that one in, and that was it. And the reason he didn't go any further, he said, is because, there's no torque settings. He didn't tell you no torque settings at all for doing anything. His reason for that was people question him too much on the torque settings. So he says, find your own torque settings. He put the one fork leg back in. And he says, I'm not going to show you doing the other leg because it's exactly the same as this leg, because he doesn't want his videos to run over 20 minutes because it's the ideal length of a video is 20 minutes because they say after 20 minutes the watcher's got bored and switches off. And if they switch off his videos get shuffled down the pile a little bit and he don't make as much money. So there's no review on riding it. It didn't show anybody how to finish the job off or a lot of it. Just bullshit to me, that is, like, really. If you're going to do something, do it right, eh? Most of you watched the video to see how you do it, not guess the second half. Anyway, why I told, the guy asked me, he says, how do you know it's going to work if I put the stock springs back in? I'm going to show you now. Now, I'm not going to run through how to show you how I do the sag. Let me get a tape roll. I've already done it, checked it on this bike. Right, let's have a look. What you do first off is jack the bike up under here so the front wheel is off the floor. You then take a measurement from, say, here, under there, to the top of the aluminium on your bottom stanchion. You measure that with the wheel in the air spinning. I'm going to call that A. So on this it was 152mm with the bike jacked up. What you do then is let the jack off, take the bike off the stand let the bike sit on its wheels itself, and you just keep hold of it so it's got some balance like that. Don't press on the bike whatsoever. Did the same measurement, which come out at 126. That's bike sat on the floor. This is going to be called the static sag. And what you do, you take 126 off the 152, A off B, that gives you 26 millimetres. There. That is called your static sag. Now what else you need now is what you call your rider's sag. Now, rider's sag is bike sat on the floor again. You sat with your helmet, your jacket, your boots, really. That's to get it as perfect as you can, right? You sit on the bike with your both feet on the footrest. You're supposed to, but it's not always easy. What I do is I sit on it, hands on handlebars, one foot on the footrest. I use the other foot, so I'm just touching the floor. Keep the bike up straight. Then you do that same measurement on your forks. Well, with me sat on my bike, this comes out at 113 mil. That's called the rider's sag. What you do then is to get the rider's sag, you take B from C, not C from B, B from C. You're 126, you take off 113 mil. That gives us 13 mil of sag on that. Then what we need then is what we call the total sag. So you add this to this, comes out at 39. What you're going to do then, sorry if this is going on a bit, but this is how you do it. Look up on the specs of the bike, you want the total suspension travel. It'll always tell you in the specs. On the Interceptor, it's 110 millimetres. That's how much travel the forks have got. When they're going up and down, that's how much travel you got. Now your sag, what you need should be a third of your total travel. So 3 divided into 110 comes out to 36. That's the ideal amount of sag you've got, total sag on your suspension travel. Well, I've got 39, which is a little bit more. That would point, to me, I'll be happy with that, because I'll tell you why in a second. That points out that for my weight, 85 kilogram, the springs in the bike are slightly softer than they need to be, because it should be 136, well, we've got more, 139. So this bike isn't that bad. What I would advise on this is take your forks out, take all the springs and everything out. You don't have to take the bottoms off. Drain all the oil out, which it is always advisable, drain one at a time and measure the oil that you've took out, because you often find at the factory they've got a mod. Drain the oil out, just flush them out, put new oil in, you stock springs back in, because the springs aren't far off, not for me anyway. You know, if I weighed 110, 120 kilogram, the springs are far too soft. You'd need stronger springs. Or if I only weighed 70 kilogram, the springs are too stiff. You'd have harsh suspension. So you still need different springs. People like Hagen's in the UK, if you say to them, I want a set of springs for my weight, they would ask you, how heavy are you? You know, what bike is it? How heavy are you? What sort of riding do you do? Is it fast road riding? Is it just cruising, tootling around the back roads? What condition are your roads in? They'd ask you all these questions, and they would make you a set of springs for you for your bike. So that's what you'd do with the spring. But these springs in this at the moment are okay for my weight on decent roads. And all I would say to you is put the new oil in, buy yourself a set of preload adjusters. You take the caps off, buy the preload adjusters so you can adjust it. You get a set of those, I don't know what they are now, about 30 quid, something like that, 20 quid. different prices, isn't there? You know, there's fancier and not so fancy, but they all do the same. You take the cap off, it replaces the cap, and you can adjust it. Like this is a bit soft, according to these figures. That's too soft, only a bit. I would gain that by adjusting the preload adjuster, which compresses the spring a bit, and effectively you'd see the bike come up slightly. That's all this bike would need. Now, I don't know what the roads are like in the UK now, only what I've lived here in Bulgaria for 12 years. I hear they're not so clever anymore, but your idea of rough roads and my idea of rough roads are totally different, believe me. So your roads, which are, don't think about your worst ones, pick your half decent ones, normal riding roads. This, in this bike, all it would need, at my weight, is a set of new oil and a set of preload adjusters. And that's going to cost you, I don't know, oil and preload adjusters, I bet you could get less than 50 quid. That's all you have to spend. And that would sort this out. Because you can't go guessing. You've got to do the sag measurements as I show it on there, or on one of my other videos. You've got to do that. If you don't know where you're going, do you? You know, it could have been too hard for a start. Now, I've seen on a lot of the forums about the YSS front spring conversion kits that people have done what I told the other guy to do. Ended up taking the springs out, putting the original springs back in with the new oil. They've left the preload adjusters in the bottom, which are doing sod all anyway. And the adjuster kit on the top that comes in with the kit. And they're going, yeah, it's fine now. Well, what a fucking waste of money that is, isn't it, eh? This what becomes of watching YouTubers who aren't genned up on what they should be doing. They're there to make a living. Can't blame them. They get supplied stuff for either next to nothing or nothing if they're big enough YouTuber. So if he's got, well, I don't know, thousands and thousands, 60, 70, 80,000 subscribers, that's a lot of people who's going to be sat watching him fit this kit and say, yeah, it's okay. Now, I did watch this guy's video of the test ride, because he did it over 2 videos. And that keeps it under his 20 minutes. Now, it starts off, he always does a lot of his videos, he's riding his bike and talking anyway. And the intro come on, then he's going down the road on his Interceptor. And he's straight away, while he was talking, I looked at it and I thought, all I could see was his mirrors was jumping about like this. The clocks on the bike, yeah, the road didn't look bad. I think it was a dual carriageway, so, you know, it wasn't that bad. And his first words was, before we start, I get a lot of people send me messages about their fitted suspension kits, and now it's worse than it was when it's stock. It's too hard. It's a lot more vicious on the road than what it was when it was stock like. And he says, what people don't realise is suspension needs to bed in. And that, like, I thought, gosh, what's he on about? Now he says, when you put a new spring in, you need 500 to 1,000 miles for the spring to bed in. And I'm thinking, well, that's a load of crap, mate, that is. If you buy a new car, it comes out with new suspension. If you do 50,000 miles, that suspension should still feel the same on that car as it did from day one. Yes, when you got to 100,000 kilometres, the suspension start sagging and wallowing about. 100,000 miles is getting worn out, you need to do something. But not 500. If your suspension springs that the fit are going to soften up, because that's what he says, they'll soften up between 500 and 1,000 miles. So if they've softened up in 1,000 miles, so after 2,000 miles, that must mean that they've softened up even more. After 5,000 miles, they're still softening up. So when you got to 10,000 miles, if you get to 10,000 miles, I would say the suspension on his theory is going to be absolutely shot. Well, it's a load of bollocks, mate, that is. Honestly. This is a Triumph Scrambler, 900 Scrambler spring. These are actually tech springs I've got. I might show you in the next video where these might be going. I don't know till I do some measurements. These don't move. It's hardened steel. If the steel isn't hardened enough, these will be coil bound. The tops here, we say the big gaps, after a certain period of time, would look like the bottom piece. And the bottom piece, if it's that soft, would be totally closed up. It'd be a solid piece of steel. So, no, they ain't going to settle in. You've either got the right spring or the wrong spring. And now I watched his riding his bike down the road, and I could tell, well, before he even opened his mouth, I thought them springs are too hard. He could see. Well, after that, I just turned it off. I didn't watch it all. I thought it was a load of crap. It just annoys me. It annoys me because there's so many guys nowadays who are wanting to do the work themselves, are willing to have a go, where at one time they'd have just taken the bike to the shop. But the costs now, like I said before, to open the shop door nowadays is £100, €100 or whatever. Horrendous prices. So if you can fit it yourself, which you can YSS send fitting instructions, or you can go on the internet and you can pull the fitting instructions off. But even YSS with the kit in the box have not told you correctly how to fit it all. You buy the parts individually and they tell you exactly how to fit it. Now, not everybody, it might be a case of they realising there's more and more people actually doing the jobs themselves, and drilling out the damper rods isn't for everybody, believe me. You get it wrong, it becomes very expensive and you could totally knacker up the suspension completely. So it's probably a bit safer if you're buying a kit to do just what they say, but it ain't going to work properly. Now, they will know, people who know about suspension won't buy a kit off a shelf anyway, because I think it's, even Ohlins do this, the springs, like for the rear shocks, their stock spring that comes on their suspension is for 85 kilogram. They say that's the average weight of a person. You've got a little bit of adjustment. So that's what they send out. It's an average weight spring. Now, if you walked into the shop and on the shop shelf you saw the box, oh, I want a YSS kit front for the Interceptor 2022 or whatever, they say, yeah, this is the one for your bike. If you said to them, well, I weigh 130 kilogram, is the springs okay? I dare bet they'll go, yeah, your weight's covered in this spring. Let in. And when you fit it, all you can do is put loads and loads of preload on to stiffen the spring up. But what that does, when you put preload on a spring, you're compressing the spring. So it makes the gaps in the coils narrower. It closes these up. Like I wouldn't get my finger end in there like I am now. Which, yes, might hold you up. But what you've done, you reduced the length of the spring, especially if you've got to adjust it a lot. So you've lost some of your travel because you hit the big bumps with it, and your travel is shorter now because you've already compressed your spring anyway. All I'm saying, guys, is there's plenty of decent mechanics on YouTube. Pick them out instead of the guys that can talk politics one day. I don't know, all sorts of things. Like, go find YouTube. There's a guy that does suspension. There is guys on there. Follow them. If you send them a question and they answer it, all well and good. You know you're on a winner. If you send them a question and you just get ignored, don't go on their advice. You know, a lot of people, like I've just showed you with this, what this actually needs doing for my weight on, I'd say, if I said UK roads or German roads, this, all it needs is an oil change and a set of preload adjusters. It doesn't need me to spend €250, pounds or whatever it is to buy a kit it doesn't really need. Anyway, another ramble, isn't it? Right, what I'm going to do next, not in this video, I'm actually going to pull my suspension out and take it to pieces and have a look. Because I've got an array of springs. I've been doing suspension for years and stuff. And I've got an idea the Triumph Street Scrambler springs might do the job on this. I don't know, honestly don't know till I took it to pieces, because I've not had this to pieces yet. If they're going to be right, it's going to give me slightly more travel. Well, I'll show you when I do it, because you have to cut the tube down. You've got to start off with the same length and blah 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 blah. So that'll be my next video. If them springs are right, I haven't got any, I will just try on this for the time being, changing the oil. I've got a set of preload adjusters coming for it. You don't have to have adjustable ones. You can make your own shims. They could be like 10mm deep or 5mm deep, whatever you need. That puts the pressure on the spring. You can't go crazy, else you'll, like I said, you'll bottom out even quicker. But we'll see. I don't know till I got it to pieces. I'm just guessing, so it might be an interesting video for those that's interested. But just be careful. Don't sit there with your credit card on the settee watching YouTube. It's a disaster. You can end up worse off than before you started. Anyway, so I'll see you in the next video. Please subscribe if you wish to. It's free. Just helps me keep this channel going. And a big thumbs up. Big thumbs up. Any comments, leave them down below. Everybody's comment I read and we answer and help. And if I can't help you, I will say. Sometimes some of the guys, we have long conversations about how to do this, how not to do that. I don't mind. It gets a bit overwhelming sometimes, but I said I'd do it and I will do it, and I'll help anybody. So see you in the next video again then. Cheers.